Well, without any further ado, I'm going to move on to our next segment now, which is a keynote address by Mr. Matt Bennett, Senior Director, Security Business at VMware Asia Pacific in Japan. And Matt is already here with us and will be talking to us, elaborating more on intrinsic security and zero trust, addressing the 5 key security challenges for today. So over to you, Mr. Bennett.
You can't predict the future, but a resilient business can be ready for it. A digital foundation from VMware helps you redefine what's possible now. From the hospital shifting to remote patient care in just 48 hours, to the university moving hundreds of apps quickly to the cloud, or the city government going digital to keep critical services running. You are creating the future on the fly, and we are helping you do it. VMware, realize what's possible.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to join you all. It's a shame it's remote, but I think what a great opportunity for all of us globally to share our thoughts and approaches to global cybersecurity at this time. My name is Matt Bennett. I'm responsible for the security business unit of VMware Carbon Black. Our mission, like many of you, is to keep the world safe from cyber attacks. And today, I want to talk a little bit about how we do that. What are our approaches to building out a security platform? And in terms of the title here, how do we make security part of what we do? How do we build it into our operations? And how do we enhance the zero trust model? How do we make sure that security is built into everything and validated through everything? And I'll talk about that through the 5 key challenges that we've identified with many of our customers today. Before I do that, I'll touch a little bit on the landscape that we all operate in. Some of the previous presenters were talking about this rapid shift to the edge, right? As we've moved to a remote first business model because of the pandemic, but it's here to stay, right? And many of these things have led to fantastic achievements for us, all of us, over the last 12 months as we've rapidly deployed new types of technologies and ways of engaging each other in these trying times. As VMware India, as we've looked at many of our customer engagements, we've seen rapid deployment of new pricing on commercial models, new ways of engaging with customers during this difficult time, new ways of making sure as a community we can come together. But for all of those things, as we make that rapid shift, our surface attack has grown exponentially. And attackers, unfortunately, have been able to take advantage of that. Not only have we seen ourselves move in terms of our users, we've seen ourselves be distributed in terms of ourselves as defenders, and that's created many challenges for us as we look to secure in this new world, this new remote first. Whether that's looking at our cloud models, whether it's looking about how we deploy applications, many of those lead to security challenges. At the same time, through that, we've seen that significant increase of attacks. Carbon Black sees about 1 trillion security events today, and we can see over the last 12-month period a significant increase in the way that people are being compromised and attempted to be taken advantage of by attackers, right? The previous speaker talked about some of the sophistication of those attacks. Some of the most recent headlines involved significantly long campaigns of intrusion before the true attack was originated and actually had an impact on the organizations, both government and industry. Right? In each of those cases, a huge amount of time went into surveilling the target. Right? We've also seen a significant increase in custom malware being used as part of those exploits. And we've seen a significant use of the supply chain. In this model of the world today where we rely on each other as a community, we have to be aware that each of us can be a problem within the chain. Each of us can be used. Someone can be used to attack you. You can be used to attack someone else, which makes it more and more important for us to identify where trust exists and make sure that we understand how we communicate from a technology point of view, but also from a social point of view as we look to share. The same way that we think about protecting ourselves in a pandemic, physical security, we need to bring that same level of approach to our digital security, right? I guess the cyber security equivalent of washing our hands, right? Ensuring that we're using multiple factor authentication, making sure that we're aware of what's occurring on our network, across our networks, and through our cloud architectures. What that means for us as defenders, and what we've seen, is there's probably 5 key challenges facing us as we look to be secure in today's world, right, and for the future. One, as we move beyond the traditional perimeter that we talked about, that creates significant security challenges. How do we make sure that while we enable people to be anywhere on any device, how do we make sure that we can provide that in a secure manner, right? As we talk about the sophisticated attacks, how do we shift beyond malware? How do we make sure that we have behavioral-based approaches that can identify threats before they become present within our environments, right? One of the challenges we all face, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, we have too many tools trying to do too many things, right? Organically over time, we've had new security challenges and we've rolled out new security tools, right? And this has created a significant bloat on our endpoints. It's created a significant challenge as we look to share information across those tools, right? That's also contributed to a challenge that we see around too many silos, where you have IT operations or IT security or other parts of the business. How do we communicate? It's not that we don't want to communicate. It's not that we don't want to share information. Part of the challenge is how do we share it? How do we share a common language? How can I, as a security defender, share the right information at the right time to somebody running our operations infrastructure, right? And those are some of the challenges we face on a day-to-day basis. At the same time, we've spent a lot of time looking at threats and understanding what might occur within a threat. But what we need is to provide more context. We need to understand, as we think about that beyond malware scenario and beyond perimeters, I need as much context as I can have to understand what's a real threat within my environment, right? We need to pull together the idea of who are you, what are you doing, when are you doing it, where are you doing it, and why are you doing it, to enable us to deploy the right security controls. Without those different elements, it's going to be very difficult for us to provide security in the right way that can actually help our businesses, right? Help us be agile. You know, as VMware India, we've helped many customers in their digital transformation. What we're seeing in this next phase is really how do we transform our digital environments, but in a vigilant manner? How do we actually bring security into those decisions and those operations? As we look at it as VMware, we feel it's about building that intrinsic security, about suppressing the ability for attackers to penetrate our organization and build an environment where security just happens. And there's a number of building blocks within that, right? We identify 3 key areas, right? As we look at what is the security challenge and how do we need to meet it. We need to move away from bolt-on security solutions, right? We need to move away from the idea that once you've deployed your application or your business use case, that we then look to determine how we're going to integrate security within it. That already creates some security challenges and potentially gaps for an attacker to take advantage of, right? We need to make sure that we reduce those silos that I talked about, that security is a challenge that we all face, that we all talk about, and that we all make part of what we do. Security done well is like the brakes on the car. It will allow you to go faster, right? And how do we build the right context? I mentioned that knowing everything is part of the problem, right? But being able to bring it together is key, right? How do I bring context from the network scenario, whether it be microsegmentation or other elements of the network detection and response? And how do I align that with endpoint detection and response? How do I align that with my SIM? How do I make sure that I can pull all of these different information points together to provide a true security scenario or solution? You know, the overall approach that we take from intrinsic security is we want to leverage all parts of the infrastructure, all of the control points that we have to produce that idea of being able to deliver any app across any cloud to any device for any of our users wherever they might sit. And to do that, we have to be able to have the right controls across all elements. And I'll talk a little bit more how we do that. So many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the types of activities that we take in cybersecurity. Many of you may have some of the projects you look at on the top line, but many of you may find that that's all being done by different tools. You might be utilizing one product for your EDR. You might be utilizing another product as you shift from traditional AV to next gen. You might have another approach as you look at how do you get visibility into your workloads. And that's part of our security challenge. How do we transform that? How do we make sure that we can do all of these use cases across all of those different applications down below, right? How do we make sure that security is consistent, whether it's on a Windows system, whether it's within Azure or AWS, whether it's in modern day application across Kubernetes? How do we make sure we're bringing the right level of security controls in a way that's scalable? As we look at it, we want to make sure that we have the maximum amount of currency along the bottom to be able to cover the maximum ways in which you might be deploying applications to your users in that remote first world. But we also want to bring the same level of security across all of them in a consistent manner. We want to be able to identify risk, right? We want to be able to make ourselves smaller, reduce our surface of attack where we can. We want to prevent activities across our organization, across our supply chain before they happen. But where we can't, where it's impossible, we then need to have a rapid detection and response. One of the biggest challenges for us as defenders is that dwell time. Time is the enemy for us as defenders. How do we maximize our ability to detect and respond? And it's built on those frameworks of identification of risk and prevention. But it's also about pulling all of that telemetry together, understanding all of those different security controls that we can use, and being able to deploy that in a single agent across multiple platforms. We might use some of this technology in different ways for different use cases, but we should have the same lens. We should have the same way of looking at it. As VMware, we're unique in the sense that we pull together both the security side and also the application and infrastructure side. As we look to kind of view what's often talked about as extended detection and response, right? Building out this future of zero trust, the idea that everything should be validated as you continue to operate. We have a unique position to kind of see across all of those components, right? Understanding who you are from an identity and access point of view, and leveraging a lot of the technology that we've built out with many of our customers in India, deploying workspace and virtual desktop through Horizon. We're able to then extend that into understanding it from a threat perspective as we look at the endpoint. And then really understanding beyond that, how do I actually then bring the same information from what's occurring within the workload, wherever it may sit, however it may sit, right, across the different cloud environments that we're using, and then across the different networks that we have, right? How do I actually make sure that I get true visibility, right? The true impact of zero trust networks, it can only happen if you have true visibility across the network and can make decisions at all of these different points. A good example of that, as I build on that from a VMware perspective in India, is the work we've done with many of our customers as they take that deployment of endpoint management, right, where they look at how do I actually link all these elements together? How do I ensure I understand what my security posture is? How do I make sure that users are accessing the right information on the right devices? And I'm minimizing my risk as they go through that. And, you know, a huge part of that is building this into a system that's going to allow us to drive orchestration and response, right? Automation is going to be key. As we talk about the environment, the security environment, as many of the speakers before me talked about, it's only going to get more sophisticated. It's only going to continue to be an area that we are fighting to make sure we're ahead of the attacker, ahead of who's looking to compromise our networks. So the power, the value of what we talked about in terms of this expanded telemetry, the ability to pull all of this information, is going to significantly address those security challenges we talked about at the beginning. Right? It's going to give us the ability to inspect and link all of these aspects together, and each technology builds on the other. The ability to kind of share the telemetry, you know, be able to look at those security events across all of those different key control points, and therefore make the right decisions, right, and enable our users in this remote first world. You know, when we look at that from the point of view of those 5 key areas in terms of how we address the security challenges today, right, we can start to see how we can actually affect change, right? How changing our approach to security can change the way that users are protected in today's world. You know, by looking at a distributed security solution, right, that looks at all of those control points, but enables us to push to the edge, right, and then leveraging the power of the cloud for analytics, gives us the ability to move to that remote first model, right? It gives us that ability to enable users in ways that we've never done before, right? The pace of change in the last 12 months has been astounding because we've been able to push beyond our typical boundaries, right? And we'll never be able to put that back in the box, right? Now this is how users expect to work. So security can be a key foundation to continue that innovation. As we look at the more sophisticated attacks, it's about leveraging that machine learning and AI to understand better what's occurring within our environments. To bring that automation, to bring that ability to understand an attack before it really develops, right? As we look at that back to a MITRE ATT&CK framework, right, we have many different points within an attacker's attack loop really to take effect, right? And being able to process that information, be able to capture all of that information and respond is going to be key for us to drive the right security solutions for today and for tomorrow, right? We have to rapidly change our approach to tools. right? Consolidation has to happen purely from a performance perspective, but ideally from a security perspective. Too many tools, too many agents, too many things that we're looking to inspect and understand. We have to be able to consolidate. It doesn't mean that we reduce our ecosystem, but it does mean we have to take a broader view of security, a platform view, right? We have to have things interconnected. You know, when we think of it in terms of what's going to be successful for us as a community, less tools allows us to be more focused, but it also allows us to break down silos. And by silos, I don't just mean the discussion between your operations and your security teams. It means us between vendors. It means governments between governments, right? The ability for us to be able to share information to the right people at the right time is going to be critical for cybersecurity to be a platform for all of us to affect change. Because of those things, if we do that, if we drive to the edge, if we allow security to exist where it's needed, for it to be agile in the same way they expect applications and data, we can kind of build to a new model. And that's how we can provide that context, right? That's how we can take that context of that infrastructure and making it more meaningful for us as organizations. Right? I now understand who you are and where you are and what you're looking to trigger. I understand that that application makes sense for you in your role, but not when it triggers another application, not when it triggers another type of activity and allowing you to traverse across the environment, right? I can understand that because I can see what's occurring both within your environment as an endpoint, within your environment as across the network, how you're utilizing our cloud infrastructure, and all of those things built to allow us to make much better security decisions, right? And that's the fundamental truth of where we sit on security today for all of us, right? We have to know more to be able to do more, and we have to do that in the context of what we see today, right? Those challenges about that rapid shift to remote. Great opportunity for all of us, but also a great opportunity for the attacker. So the more we can do together to drive as a community, the more safer we will be, and the better we can work together to keep ourselves safe from cyber attacks. So I want to thank you for taking time to spend with me today, and I hope to see many of you in the future, both virtually and physically. Thank you very much.